Water covers approximately 71% of Earth's surface, and its interaction with the land can be significant. In many of these places, we find tides. But what causes them? And what impact do they have on our lives and the places around us? Tides occur as a result of attractive forces, a gravitational battle between the sun, moon and Earth, pulling in different directions.
Everybody doesn't think about the sun and the moon, but they're absolutely crucial to us when we're working with the tides out at sea.
The gravitational forces of both the moon and the sun create tides as they pull the Earth's water across the surface towards them. Most areas, therefore, experience too high and low tides every day. The tidal ring is largest when high tides are at their highest and low tides are at their lowest when the moon and sun line up, which occurs during a new moon and a full moon. These are known as spring tides. When the moon and sun are at right angles to each other in relation to Earth, the tidal ring is less. These are known as neap tides. The changing sea level can have a dramatic impact on the environment, both in terms of natural landscape and wildlife, as well as in a human capacity. The immediate area that experiences these changing sea levels has some fascinating flora and fauna in what is known as the intertidal zone.
The intertidal zone is a really unique part of the marine environment. It's in the area where the tide covers the shore for part of the day. So this means that depending on how high up the shore the animals and plants are, they are uncovered for varying amounts of time. The intertidal zone is actually one of the most biodiverse marine habitats on the planet. It has 10 times as much life as your average bit of seabed, and that's because there's lots and lots of food availability. There are over 100 different habitats that you find here, and the way habitats work on the intertidal is that they change with height. So the further away you get from the sea, the less salt water you get, so you get different species. The temperature is really variable, so obviously it can be really hot in the summer to really, really cold in the winter. Whereas in the ocean itself, the temperature is really stable. Most land plants couldn't cope with losing much of their water volume at all, whereas on the shore, seaweeds are all adapted so they can lose up to 90% of the volume of their water. For the animals, you've got two strategies basically. You can either run and hide, or you can clamp down really tight. Starfish and quite a few of the snails and the fish and crabs are the ones that run and hide. And then you've got the things that aren't able to move, so your limpets and your barnacles, so their only choice is to clamp down really tight. At the moment we're in the middle shore, so there's a range of species. This one I'm pointing to is a beadlet anemone. They're specially adapted to cope with desiccation by being completely enclosed. This is a dog whelk, and that's one of the main predators of the mussels that are on the rocks here, and they've got what's called a rasping tongue. So their tongue is a bit like sandpaper, and they use it to drill a hole into the mussel shell, and then they turn the mussel into a bit of a soup with their stomach acid, and then they suck the mussel back up. We're into the lower shore zone now, and what we're coming over here to have a look at is a really nice ledge which has got a pool running all the way along it, and because that never dries out, there's quite a variety of life that you don't get on the open bits of rock. In this pool we can see quite a variety of seaweeds in the water here. There's a lot of pink algae. They're actually called coralline algae, and they've got a structure similar to coral, and they're a bit more delicate, so that's why they're only found in the rock pools. In this rock pool you can see a whole collection of snake-lock anemones. These guys aren't able to retract their tentacles, so you only find them in places that stay wet throughout the whole tidal cycle. So down here we're now into the area that's really only exposed on really big spring tide. So the big difference in this community is you're starting to get these big seaweeds called kelps. This area, because it's got lots of nice crevices, you can see that there are a number of starfish living. So starfish are big predators. They are completely mobile. They can walk all over the shore, but they dry out really quickly. So that's why when the tide's out like it is at the moment, they're tucked right into these crevices. This larger one is the spiny starfish. Next to it, we've got a much smaller cushion starfish. So these guys tend to eat lots of mollusks, and they have a combined stomach and anus. So it's one hole for both jobs. They empty their stomach out onto whatever it is they're trying to eat, and the acid in their stomach completely dissolves the mussel, and then they suck it back up a bit like a milkshake. The intertidal zone faces quite a range of threats, mostly human related. Lots and lots of people want to live and work in the coastline, so that can have impacts. The coast is also at real threat from climate change and ocean acidification. Because it's already a very extreme environment, the animals and plants are adapted to cope with that, but they're really at the limits of what their biology can tolerate.
So tides create opportunity for unique aspects of nature to flourish. But this environment can be unpredictable. Coastal areas can be an appealing prospect for many, visiting the beach, the chance to swim in the sea, fishing or sailing. But with these activities there comes potential danger if these tidal forces are underestimated.
We have Europe's biggest bay, so this fills up every 12 hours and then it empties. We get a 10.4 metre range of water coming in from 0 to 10.4 metres at high water, and then it goes back out in 6 hours, back to low water again. This is the Admiralty chart of the area. We have it positioned here to help pinpoint where the casualty is. But basically the yellow bit is the land, the green bits are the sandbanks that dry out at low water on a spring tide, the blue bits are the shallow waters, and the white bits very deep water. This is higher than the inshore side, so the water comes in and floods this part first, and anybody in this area is potentially very easily cut off. The RNLI is a volunteer lifeboat service maintained from 297 stations around the UK and the Republic of Ireland, operating a 24-hour rescue service 365 days a year. The tide comes in and obviously it floods across the low-lying parts of the beaches first, but further offshore, and especially in our area, is where the higher beaches are. So the tide will come in behind you. And once it starts coming in behind you, then obviously you're going to be cut off. The tide doesn't just come in, it races in. At the top of the bay, the tide comes in quicker than a galloping horse. It's a huge speed. So that's something that we've got to watch. As the tide goes out, you can't get cut off by it. But what you can do, because it's exposing all the mud and the sand that's been underneath the water, that is very, very soft now. And if you go into that mud, then you're going to get trapped into the quicksand. And this is a major problem for estuary areas. If you have a look over on this side here, you can see where you've got relatively hard sand, the dark sand that's coming up, and then it goes down and it goes into very, very sloppy sand. So it gets like a crust over it, so it looks nice and dry, but it's literally just the skin on a custard. As soon as you put your weight on the custard, then you just sink down into it. And once, as I say, once it gets around your knees, realistically, you've not got to do any movement at all because it will just go worse and worse. What you need to do is sit down onto the mud and attract attention to yourself. Most important thing is respect the water. Know what the tide's doing and know that there's perils of the tide just after it's exposed the beach as well as when the tide's coming in. Everybody doesn't think about the sun and the moon, but they're absolutely crucial to us when we're working with the tides out at sea.
As well as the threat tides and currents can pose to people, the action of waves crashing against land can lead to some powerful and destructive forces. Coastal erosion. The breaking down of land where it meets the sea can be a real hazard, putting livelihoods at risk from diminishing beaches, collapsing cliffs, and the gradual degradation of the coast. So how does this happen, and what can be done to protect against it?
This is a really high energy area. You can see the pebbles around here, and they hit the defences and rip it to bits. In 1977 there was a big breach of the defences in this area where we stood, and that flooded 2,500 properties. So after that the council at the time constructed a seawall which has stood the test of time, but it wasn't particularly useful in terms of using natural forces and taking the energy out of things, and that's why we've developed this scheme. When you first start a scheme like this, what you're trying to do is understand what the environment is doing to your coastline. So the first line of defence is always the beach. Then look at the rock element of this, so we then try and take out the energy as it hits the hard defences. These rock groins, they work really well because they allow energy to dissipate through them as well, whereas the timbered groins tend to be reflective. Each individual rock has been weighed, each individual rock has been placed using a GPS locator. The important bit really is the gaps between them as well. So you've got a solid unit, but it's the gaps which take out the energy. When we get storms, we get rocks of this sort of size being thrown up, and you can imagine one of these being thrown up onto the concrete, and it causes quite a lot of damage, and that's what was happening in the previous schemes. We still get rocks of this size being thrown up onto the defences, but only onto this lower area, and the idea is that the energy is taken out, and as we go further up the defences it becomes less energy, and so you just get water thrown up there and we get very little on the upper promenade. The other side of it is looking at the environment and how the defence interacts with that environment. You can put concrete walls and big high elements up, but that doesn't react with the environment well, and you don't get the biodiversity that we get on this scheme. So we're starting to encourage animals to live here.
The rocky groins provide loads of little nooks and crannies that things can settle into, just a harder surface that things like barnacles will settle onto more easily. We get lots of interesting animals in the tidal pools that are formed by the groins, common prawns and gobies and blennies, little shore crabs. We find lots of mussels as well, so there's mussel beds out here in the bay. We get lots of interesting animals living within the sediment as well on the beach. So we get a lot of lugworms and ragworms and little beach hoppers. Because it's such a nutrient-rich environment around here. It's just an incredible area ecologically.
Part of the whole scheme was to upgrade this whole landward side and create a better place for nature. And the emphasis was on create it and they will come. The grassland species and the flowers that were here were seed collected, and then they were sent away for propagation, which created a turf. And when the sea defence works and the engineering was finished, that turf got relayed onto this site to keep its biological heritage status. The old site had a concrete swale running the whole length of this site to catch any water that was overtopped from storms and stuff like that. It was not nice to look at, it was quite unpleasant. And what has happened, the whole site has been reprofiled, lovely pathways have been put in, and a couple of dipping pools as well. Also further along we've created hiberniculums, so areas for newts and toads to hibernate over winter. Already we have discovered a number of species of flowers that have not been seen locally in Lancashire for a long time. Insects and butterflies and various other species that hopefully we will be surveying for and finding in years to come.
One of the things that we did right at the outset was to consult with our residents to see what sort of they wanted to see from the new defences that we were going to put in place. And one of the features that they came forward with was they wanted easy access from their homes on the roads, and they wanted to be able to access the beach as well.
Public engagement is such an important tool for conservation. Particularly when we're working with children. Children just absolutely love marine wildlife and getting out on the beach, and when they first learn about mermaids' purses, which are shark and ray egg cases, they just find it incredible that they're like, oh, there was a baby shark inside this and now it's washed up on the beach.
Over 7,000 homes are protected by the scheme. If we did have flooding in this area, not only would people be affected in their homes because they are below sea level, but also it'd have a massive effect on the infrastructure and the life of the whole of the borough.
So the gravitational battle taking place between celestial bodies can have a powerful and significant effect on life on Earth. They bring challenges for human survival, but also opportunities for nature to evolve and thrive, whilst also shaping the planet around us. And these are just some of the ways that we experience the incredible power and effect of space on Earth.